The Enlightenment in Europe and the Americas. The late 17th and early 18th centuries in England and France, in particular, were times of great tension between those who believed in ancient or classical ideals and those who believed in progress and modernity. Despite this tension between ancients and moderns, both groups believed in the primacy of reason, as opposed to, say, faith or imagination or intuition. Philosophers at this time explored the subjective I, trying to delineate precisely what it meant to be human, i.e., to be a reasoning, communicating, observing entity. Thinkers embraced deism, and God was viewed as a watchmaker who never interfered with human action. Enlightenment thinkers distinguished humans by the particular faculty of reason. Unlike animals, humans and the capacity to think through relationships between objects or events, they could establish cause and effect and follow logical arguments. Freedom was an important word for the period. Freedom to use one's own reason against traditional authorities, and the new science of economics trended toward a free market to produce wealth. Other thinkers, such as Kant, felt that in politics, leaders should maintain discipline and restrict the masses in order to ensure an enlightened conversation without prejudice or superstition. The age also spawned a sense of European superiority, leading to problems of racism and slavery at the advent of progress. The image you see in this slide is an illustration from an early 18th century edition of French philosopher René Descartes' unfinished book on the human body. Descartes saw the body as a machine whose operations could be understood mathematically. Deism was a belief in God, which understood the divine to be revealed only in his works, like the natural world itself, for example. Thus, the scientific study of nature could be understood as, in part, the work of understanding the divine. Many Enlightenment philosophers explored the relationship between the individual and the universe. One widely shared idea posited a great chain of being, a vast hierarchy that explained every creature's relationship, above or below on the great chain, to all others. Despite, or maybe because of, its being an era of social instability, the Enlightenment was equally a time that emphasized rules of decorum and social civility. Elaborate social hierarchies emerged, with aristocratic elites at the top, a growing middle or working class, and the poor or enslaved at the bottom. Gender roles were rigid, and women, even the upper class, enjoyed few opportunities for education or profession. The topic of children is curiously absent from much Enlightenment writing, largely because the age believed so strongly in the capacity of reason to guide behavior and judgment, and children were not understood to possess a reasoning power developed enough to warrant much attention. The image you see on your screen is The Topsy-Turvy World by Dutch painter Jan Steen from 1663. The painting presents a satirical picture of the disarray in the household of a newly wealthy middle-class family. The idea of decorum extended into the literary world as well. Writers understood that there were proper genres and styles that were suitable for certain subjects. It would have been deemed indecorous or lacking in decorum, for example, to write about common domestic subjects in grand poetic style. Enlightenment writers and readers understood that literature existed to both delight and instruct. Modern readers may often feel that 18th century literature, given its emphasis on artifice, does a poor job of representing reality. However, 18th century writers did not understand art's goal as reproducing reality. On the contrary, they understood that art was to take real experience and represent it in a way that conformed to literary convention. The image you see on your screen is a bust of Voltaire by French sculptor Joseph Rosé, 1750 to 1786. Through the 17th century, the growing belief in reason as the best guide to governance, ethics, and morality led to a great social change, not least in regards to a faltering belief in the divine right of kings to rule absolutely over a social body. Thus, the spirit of rebellion emerged in places like England and France, not to mention America. Alexander Pope, in his essay on man, nevertheless, pointed out that passion also played a role in people's decision-making processes. On your screen, you see the image, which is a drawing from an illustrated edition of The Rape of the Lock, an heroic comical poem in 5 cantos by Alexander Pope. So let's test our knowledge. The Enlightenment was a time of great tension between the ideals of tradition and progress, philosophy and literature, poetry and drama, or religion and deism. Pause the video and make your selection. The late 17th and early 18th centuries in England and France, in particular, were a time of great tension between tradition and progress, i.e., between those who believed in ancient or classical ideals and those who believed in the progress and modernity. This tension can also be understood in terms of an allegiance to either permanence, tradition, or change, modernity. Number 2. Enlightenment philosophers and writers, regardless of their belief in tradition or progress, tended to value which following? Imagination, natural philosophy, reason, realism. Pause the video and make your selection. Despite the tension between ancients and moderns, both groups believed in the primacy of reason. The Romantic movement, which followed the Enlightenment, put a greater emphasis on imagination, partly as a reaction against what they perceived to be the limits of reason. Number 3. The topic of children is largely absent from Enlightenment writing because infant mortality was so high. It was only in adulthood that people assumed social responsibility. Children were not taught to read until adulthood. The topic of children was considered indecorous. Pause the video and make your selection. The topic of children is curiously absent from much Enlightenment writing, largely because the age believed so strongly in the capacity of reason to guide behavior and judgment, and children were seen as lacking in reasoning power. Number 4. What was the great chain of being as Enlightenment thinkers understood it? A guide to proper behavior and decorum, the historical royal lineage, the part of God as watchmaker, a hierarchy that put everything in its place. Pause the video and make your selection. The great chain of being was the vast hierarchy that explained every creature's relationship above or below on the great chain to all others. God was at the very top, while devils and demons occupied the very bottom. Everything had its place. The Enlightenment ideal of decorum suggested that all subjects were fit for literature, all literary genres were equally important, literary subjects must be fitted to their appropriate genre. Genre was always more important than subject. Pause the video and make your selection. The 18th century was a time of great emphasis on decorum, proper behavior at the proper time. The idea of decorum extended into the literary world as well. Writers understood that there were proper genres and styles that were suitable for certain subjects. It would have been deemed indecorous, or lacking in decorum, for example, to write about common domestic subjects in a grand poetic style. In short, literary decorum means that subjects must be fitted to their appropriate genre. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. Bye.